Hello and welcome to CGTN. I'm Yuan. We're right now in Macau, ahead of the 20th anniversary since Macau returned to China. We're at the historic center of the city. Many people, when they talk about the city of Macau, they think of its casinos or its ruins of the Sao Paulo. But it's iconic historic center is actually designated by UNESCO as an important world cultural heritage. That's where we are right now, at the heart of the city. The city's 300-year colonial history has left a precious cultural heritage, which is most obvious in the architecture lining its historic center. And joining me today is Professor Francisco Pinheiro. He's an architect and an associate professor at the University of St. Joseph, Macau. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Thank you, Yuan.
First, tell us a little bit about where we are right now, because this is an important building in Macau's historic center, right?
So this is one of the most important buildings of Macau because this is called the Senate building. Senate was an institution inspired in the Roman Empire, and the Senate was a group of the most important people of Macau that ruled the city. And they rule the Portuguese, let's say, in the city. They are also the ones who deal with anything with China, also the trade with Japan, with ASEAN, Thailand, Philippines, India and Portugal. So they were not only bureaucrats who deal about the daily life of the city, but also some of them were businessmen who promote the city trade and the development. So thanks to the Senate, the city prospered, because before the Senate was created in 1583. And the problem is the city was not well organized. There were many discussions about the businessmen, so they used to go to the priests to solve the problems. And then the bishop told them, well, you should organize a Senate, means a group of the elderly people to solve the disputes. So this building, the first building, is from the 16th century, and the building where we are now is already the fourth version, at least. So the
fourth version.
Fourth version. You will see in some tiles downstairs the evolution. So the existing one is from 1784. Then it was damaged in a big typhoon in 1874. And was somehow rebuilt in 1876. And then there was other remodelings, like the tiles that we see here. This is in the 1930s. So, and the tiles downstairs around 10 years ago. So the building suffered some improvements. And this building was also many things. It was the clinic, the judge was here, there was a small jail, there was a school, they have a post office, the public works. So it was really the heart of the government of the city.
It really stood through everything.
Yes.
The entire history of the city, the goods and the bad.
Yes, it's straight through the history. And you will see the square in front of the building is the most important square of Macau, right. Is the Senado Square.
And we're going to see that square in just a little bit, but just show me around this garden, will you, Professor? As an architect, talk to us about some of the architectural elements and the style of this building, because this doesn't feel like a city in China. It could be anywhere in Europe, right?
Yeah, it's very much European style, neoclassic. You see the triangles, pediments, and the windows is the neoclassic architecture used. The tendency is to be neoclassic and simple at the same time, so you don't have big balconies or arcades. So it's very simple.
Yeah, it does look simple and clean as well, except for all the festive decorations going on here, because it's the Christmas season.
Yes. And then you also have a fountain in the back, and there is a stone. Or maybe we can talk first about this statue here.
The statue here, of course.
Of course. So the one behind the angel, that is Camões, or Luís Vaz de Camões. Is the most famous poet. He's like the Portuguese Shakespeare, and he wrote part of his work in Macau in the 16th century. And he was here when he was here, he was in the grotto, called the Camões Grotto, and he wrote about the Portuguese Odyssey, about the time of the discoveries, because the Portuguese are the ones who launched in the 15th century the discoveries by sea.
The mighty explorers and navigators
Yes.
of the Portuguese Empire.
Yes, so they discovered it, they went around the world, and they connect directly Europe and Asia, so Europe and China. You can see that in the symbol in the stone. So that stone before was in the entrance of the building. You have a chain linked to other stones similar.
Which stone? Let's
This one.
go that you can point it out to me. This piece of stone.
Yeah, this piece of stone. So these represent the world, and then the navigation is called the armilar sphere. So it represents the Portuguese going around the world by navigation.
It actually kind of looks like a ship. I don't know if I'm right, but
Yeah,
this
cross.
kind of looks like a sail of the ship.
Well, no, this is the globe, the sphere, and the cross represented the Portuguese ships were also crusaders.
Oh, okay.
So,
So I'm completely wrong here.
no. So yeah, many people don't know, but this was at the time the expeditions were sponsored by the Portuguese king.
Right.
So they have the official symbol that was the cross of Christ.
So I also want to just remind our audience, Professor, that I have my phone with me. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments on our social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, as well as the Chinese Weibo. So if there's anything you want to ask Professor Pinheiro, feel free to do so on our social media platforms.
Okay,
So
welcome.
let's continue.
So maybe we can go now to see the downstairs. There are some tiles
Right.
showing the city.
But before we do that, can we actually see the tiles here?
Oh, yes,
Because
yes.
These are very Portuguese. The Portuguese tiles called
Azulejos.
Are they azulejos?
Azulejos because azul means blue,
Right,
so blue tiles.
right.
This is very common in Portugal, and these were imported from Portugal. This is a factory who do this. And the system is a little bit different than the Chinese technique.
Right.
And in the Portuguese, they also have some with color. You can change the topic, the theme, but mostly it's for important buildings or churches. So it's a good decoration because it can last for centuries, so don't need maintenance.
And it's also very famous worldwide. Even people who haven't been to Portugal know several things about the country. It's wine, Lisbon City, and these Portuguese tiles.
Portuguese style, yes.
What are some of the common patterns?
Well, here the fishes that represent the sea, and then the flourishing, the flowers, so is linked with maritime trade at the same time. The symbol of abundance with the fruits.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes, so right now let's go downstairs.
Yes, let's go downstairs.
It's amazing that I was told that in Macau, you people basically celebrate every festival,
Yes, that's
Chinese
true.
ones and Western ones.
We are lucky to have all the Chinese festivals, like the Buddha birthday, the national holiday in October, and also the Portuguese and Catholic festivals.
And that means you also celebrate every religion. It's a very inclusive culture here in Macau.
Yes, this is one landmark or trademark of Macau is the comprehension and mutual understanding between the different religions. Mostly the Buddhism, Taoism, and Christianity, but we have also other religions here.
You can have one religious site standing right next to the other. You can have a
Yes.
temple standing next to a church. And to me, that's just fascinating.
Yes, it's a tolerance of Macau, and Macau is a place of tolerance. It also is a place of interchange. So people interchange science, technology, art, religious idea, political, trade. So it's a place of interchange and cooperation.
And I think it's such a shame that when people talk about Macau, they only think about its gaming industry or they only think about the ruins of Sao Paulo. It doesn't even have its own Lonely Planet travel book. It's like a day trip from Hong Kong, right? People say that Macau is a day tripper. But actually, if you take the time to really wander through the heart of the city, it actually has a lot to offer to tourists.
Yeah, Macau have many layers of history linked with China history, Japan history. For example, the Taiping Revolution in China have some influence from the Protestant publicity at the time. Sun Yat-sen was here. He was protected by the Macau government. So you have many things of cooperation. Macau helped the Ming Dynasty fight the Manchus. So the place was very important, so important that the Dutch and the British tried to conquer, but they did not manage to conquer, so they built Hong Kong nearby. So Hong Kong is near Macau because the British want the place or some place nearby here.
Is there a second choice?
Second choice. But before, there were many British also living here, British, American, Chinese, so you have, it was a United Nations city.
That was an interesting piece of history, Professor. I didn't know that, but let's go back to the tiles that you were planning on showing us.
So this is one of a copy of an old map of this around 1634, so 17th century, and it shows the Portuguese city. These are the walls, the sea walls, and our building is this one. So behind the building there was a garden.
So this is the building that we're in right now?
Yes, well, it was a different building, but it's the place. And you can see it's in the very heart of the city, because this is the Senado Square, the place where we will visit it soon. And on this part was the inner harbor. This place was later occupied mostly by Chinese.
Okay.
So we can call it kind of Chinatown. Because Macau have two different cities, a western city facing the sea, that the buildings were a copy of the ones in Portugal or India overseas, and the Chinatown that was completely different from the Portuguese.
Is there still this kind of divide right now?
No, because we'll see later they open an avenue that cut through the two cities.
Right.
And many of the Chinese buildings are disappearing now. That's a pity. But before, the reports of the foreigners visiting the city, they say there were like two cities. So when you cross one street, you are in China, you cross the other one, you are in Europe.
So then you as an architect, when you study the architecture of Macau right now, basically there are Chinese-style buildings standing side by side with the Western-style buildings. It's such a wonderful fusion, right?
Yes, we are very lucky to have these two heritage. And the government have done a good job in protecting the heritage, both Portuguese and Chinese. So that story of the two peoples can be keep in memory and keep for future generations.
Right. So, Professor, should we walk inside
Yes.
the lobby of the Senado building?
Here show the building again. This is 19th century, and the building is here. So this is the building.
How can you tell that this is the one?
Well, because I study the maps in the computers, and you can see not only the building but the square in front of it.
Oh, okay.
So we can pinpoint clearly the buildings.
Who did these tiles?
Well, we did the project. Some years ago I was working in the municipal government. But this is based on an original drawing by a Chinese artist that was around the 1818, so 19th century.
19th century, wow. It's getting a bit crowded in the afternoon. Yeah. Is this Senado building still in use by the government?
Yeah, here you can see
different eras of the building that we're in.
Yeah, the building, here you can see the different eras. This is a Baroque building.
This is Baroque style.
Yeah,
and it says 1789.
So this is based on a drawing by a British, George Chinnery. And at that time the taste was Baroque. You can see the columns, you can see the decoration of the windows, more elaborate. But this building was damaged because Macau have terrible weather and typhoons can be very powerful.
Was that the same one that destroyed the Sao Paulo church?
No. São Paulo church was a fire.
Oh yeah, that was a fire. But I thought the fire was caused by a typhoon. No. I could be wrong. I'm totally
I'm
wrong.
not sure about this. But I think was because at that time there was no priests, there were only soldiers that occupied the place. And so that's when the fire happened. And later they demolished the rest of the church to build a new one. But they ran out of money, so only the facade remained, supposed to be rebuilt.
It's such a pity because it's a very important icon for Macau's colonial history. It was the biggest church in Asia at the time, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was also the first university in Asia, so the most, I mean, Western university in Asia.
Which trained Catholic priests and missionaries?
Yes, and also some other people, Macau youth also can study there. So they learn languages, music, mathematics, theology. So it was real universal learning.
So you can even say that the Sao Paulo Church was the cradle of. You can even say that that was the cradle of Christianity in Asia.
Yes, that's another point. Macau is a place of Christianity in Asia, but it's a Christianity that is not aggressive. It's a Christianity that went to dialogue. So here, the priests learned Chinese to go to China. So they did not force people to learn Portuguese or English. So they adapt to the Chinese culture. We have important people like Matteo Ricci, Limate, Werbiester. So they were trained in Macau, adapting to the Chinese culture before going to China.
A starting point of Christianity in Asia. Speaking of which, you wanted to show us that piece of stone up there?
Yeah, that piece of stone is, it represents Our Lady as a queen, and she have a mantle, a big mantle protecting people on the left and the right. And some are priests, others are common people. And this goes to another institution, because this stone was in the church, a small church that was in Senado building. And this institution was called the Holy House of Mercy, or Santa Casa in Portuguese. And this institution take care of the orphans, of the widows, of the poor. They also run hospitals, schools, so they have many, help the government to run the city. It was a kind of a Catholic brotherhood, so people help with money for them to do this entrepreneurship. So, and sometimes they help the government with the funds.
And we're actually going to walk past that building in our little adventure for the afternoon.
Yes.
So do remind us again when we see that building in just a moment.
Okay. There are some stones here. You can see that stone is very interesting. This stone with an eagle. You see there is an eagle with two heads. And almost no one knows what is the meaning. But this is a time of when Macau and Portugal were under the Chinese king.
Under the Chinese king.
Sorry, under the Spanish king.
Spanish king.
From 5080 to 6040s. And the Spanish, the eagle represent the east and the west. So is also you have in the feet they have the sun and the moon. That means the empire where the sun never set, because from South America, Spain, Philippines, the sun was always shining in the Spanish Empire. So these represent a period of Macau under the Spanish rule.
And where did this one come from?
These come from the Augustinians monastery. There was Augustinian priests. And you can see in the shield there is a heart and then a glass. And the heart is pierced by arrows. So
I can barely make out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. A heart.
So heart. And the arrows means is in love. And the blood coming to the vessel. And then there is a book that is the Bible. So this is a symbol. Also there is a heart of the bishop. This is a symbol of Saint Augustine. That was a bishop in the 4th century. And he is the one who wrote and influenced the Western civilization about ideas and philosophy, theology.
It's wonderful that they actually collected these stones and kind of gathered them here at the Senado building for people to look at.
Because this building was also a museum. So
Is
that's
it still?
why, Yeah, that's why you have different stones from different parts.
It's also a tour site,
Yes,
and it's
it's a
getting
tour
quite a bit crowded in the afternoon.
Yes, this building is very much visited by
And you
tourists.
said you used to work here in this building?
Yes, I work in this institution. Sometimes I come here. I've been in Macau for 30 years. My father was born here. My grandfather worked here, and my grand-grandfather worked here. Probably my grand-grandfather met at least in the street, or it was the time of Sun Yat-sen,
Wow.
so he was here.
You've lived here for how long? 30, 40 years, you said?
30 years.
30 years. What kept you here? What brought you here in the first place?
Well, it was an invitation because Macau, 30 years ago, there was a lot of projects going on. And
You're just saying hi to everyone because you know
yeah,
these people.
I know some of them because they are
How long did you work here in this building?
well, in this institution around 25 years.
Wow.
Well, there's another one, sorry, here maybe a little bit less.
Right, right. So once we walk across the street, maybe we can have a full view of the entire building from farther away.
So this is San Malo, you want to talk? That is the first casino in Macau, the green building.
That green one,
Yeah.
新中央
Yes.
Hotel Central.
So this Hotel Central was the first modern casino and hotel in Macau.
When was it opened?
This is 1930s that they received the monopoly of the gambling. Before there were many different houses, 200, and then they received from the government the monopoly. It means just one company, imagine. And so they built a hotel, and it was the tallest building in the Portuguese Empire.
That's not very tall, though.
Well, now no, but before was very tall. And then this avenue was to connect the Senado Square with in Chinatown, with the inner harbor, because the two cities live separate. So by opening this street, they connect the two cities, the Chinese city and the Portuguese city. So all the buildings are the same time, particularly from 1914 to 1930s.
So, Professor, I think we're getting some comments from our internet users right now,
Okay.
and they're all saying that this is a fantastic place. They're also asking who you are. Those of our watchers who probably didn't watch from the very beginning, just introduce yourself again to them.
Okay, so I am an architect. I study buildings and city design, and I also be working and study research the history of Macau. So I'm now a teacher in the University of St. Joseph, and my research is about not only the architecture, but the influence of Macau in China, particularly in China, but also in Japan, Korea. So Macau is a small city, but have a huge influence in the region. So it's a very amazing story too, and the more we study, the more we discover.
Because architecture is such an integral part of our daily life that it speaks so much about the culture and the identity of a city and the history of a city as well. But before we go into that, I just want to give you sort of a full view of the building that we were in right now, just now. This is probably one of Macau's busiest streets, no?
Yes, this is the busiest street because it's is near the casino, and so everybody pass here. So this is the building of 1876, and the roof changed. So you have many renovations through but it was the center of the city, the power of the city.
Still is probably right now, right?
No more.
Right now, where would you say is the city's heart nowadays? The casino district?
No, well, we have a chief executive. This is a kind of the Macau governor. The governor only came on the 19th century. Before there was a Senate to decide things. But the casinos, of course, they have a lot of power in changing the city. But thanks God they are not near the historical center, although you can see some of them far away.
Right. So, talk about casino. It still accounts for about 80% of Macau's economy today.
Yes.
And so the city's economy is very dependent on the casino industry.
Yes.
But right now there are sort of plans to diversify the economy and change it into sort of a financial hub in Asia. Do you think that's going to change the soul of the city, the spirit of the city? More development, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, Macau developed a lot, but we have a problem. It's a very small land territory. So we have no space to grow. What happened is we have been developed landfills on the sea to develop. But Macau have its own role in the Great Bay Area and will be more about entertainment. So I think that's the diversification that Macau needs, is entertainment, maybe more family entertainment, but also education. Macau is a good place to have universities where people from all over the world can come and to study the Chinese culture, the Western culture. So it's a good place because the Westerns feel at home here, and also Chinese people feel well. So it's a good place to continue to be a meeting place like it was in the 16th, 17th century.
Talk about education. I think the work that you're doing right now as a professor at St. Joseph University is so important because we need younger generation people to kind of preserve this wonderful cultural mix here at Macau.
Yes, that's part of my teaching, is to tell them about the Macau heritage, but also about urban planning, city planning. And in city planning, you have to plan heritage as part of the equation, not something that is against, to demolish, because it's all, in many cities, the heritage is disappearing. So in Macau, we try to put heritage as a part of the plan, but we have other stakeholders like the casinos, the universities, and let's see what's happened because the city keeps growing.
Right. And you wanted to show us this building. This was the one that you talked about, the Catholic Brotherhood.
Yes, this is the Holy House of Mercy, the Catholic Brotherhood. This was the headquarters. This building is approximately 100 years old. Before there was a church here and another building. And the stone we saw in the Senado building come from this church before. So they still have many properties and goods given by the Catholics.
What do they use it for nowadays? Because I think the first floor is, the ground floor is a convenience store, it's a drugstore maybe?
That's right. The ground floor is a shop, but the above floor is a museum and also is the headquarters of the institution.
Is the museum open to the public?
Yes, it's open to the public.
Macau also has a lot of museums, right?
Yes, yes. Sorry. So these buildings that we are in the left, this was a Chinese hotel in early 20th century, then became the headquarters of the electricity company, then the tourism office headquarters, and now is a tourist center support and a shopping center. So as you can see, the old buildings change function to adapt to the new needs.
I just think it's fascinating that Macau, as a tiny peninsula, like you said before, has so many cultural and architectural gems that everywhere you walk, there's something that catches your eyeball and there's a story behind that building.
That's true. And for example, here near this place, that buildings were demolished already. Probably Sun Yat-sen have an office here. So he probably walked a lot in this square. Now the stones that you see, the cobblestones,
Right. The stone.
this was done in 1993, 94.
Okay.
Before you have cars coming in, and this was a car park also. So it took us some time to convince the people that was good to close to the traffic, but the local businessmen opposed because they were afraid they will lose business. But what happened is after cutting the traffic with the flower pots, more and more people keep coming to the square. So at the end they decide to close it and to use this is called the Portuguese Cobblestones. Mostly it's black and white. It's very common in the Portuguese-speaking countries. So you also have in Brazil, in Angola, Mozambique. And also I saw already some projects in China, they also use these cobblestones.
Is there a reason why are these cobblestones so good?
Well, they reflect the light. You can put different drawings, so it's like a kind of a carpet. So when you walk, it's better to walk on this than to walk in concrete.
Boring concrete.
That boring concrete. Also, these stones are recyclable. If you need to do some hole, you can remove them, and then you can put them back again.
Oh, you remind me of something, Professor. I read somewhere that the Portuguese tiles actually have temperature control functions. Is that right?
Temperatures?
Temperature control functions.
Well, there are many theories. Yeah, they reflect the sun, they absorb. The tiles are good because they do not radiate so much heat. And yes, that's one of the virtues of these materials.
And tell us a little bit about your teaching at St. Joseph University. Like, what's the one course that you're most passionate about? Is there one?
My course, more passionate, I finished just yesterday, is called the Studio 7. It's a course about rehabilitation of buildings. So the students have to study a whole building and have to see how they can improve, conserve the historical value of the building, at the same time give a new function, but to preserve the memory. So it's a difficult exercise because some students have difficulty to see what they can touch, what can improve, and how they can keep the tradition or the function of the building with a new layout or the new adaptation.
Does opening shops on the ground floor count as a new function to historic buildings?
Well, the ones we are seeing, no. Most of the functions were linked with the previous function, like, for example, to be a youth hostel or a library, or even one of them study about the kindergarten. So it's to reuse, but not changing much. But some things, of course, you need to change. Also because of safety reasons. You know, the stairs in the old buildings are very steep, very dangerous. There is no exit doors for safety, so they need to improve to make some adaptations to the building.
So these shops are a bit too much for you?
Yes, the shops here, there was some gentrification. There was local shops. There was a barber shop there, was Shanghai barber shop. But when the quality, more tourists come, the quality of the shops improve. It means they were bought by big companies. So this become more international. This is not such a good effect, I think.
And so we've come to this church. Tell us a little bit about this building, because this is one of the, I think many people call this one of the most beautiful churches in Macau.
Yes, I think for me it's the most beautiful. Also inside. Now it's closed, we cannot go in. But this building, the first building was built of wood. That's why it was called a wooden church. And this was built by the Dominicans. The Dominicans is an order, a Catholic order. Many of them are intellectuals. So, but this church, the building is from 1721.
1721, this particular one.
Yes, and then there was different renovations. What is special is different from the European buildings is the big windows and the big doors. They also have the big windows and big doors on the sides, and this is because of the weather here is very warm. So they need to do changes different from Europe. That in Europe you don't have such windows open like a house.
Local tweaks.
Yeah, local adaptation. It's a Baroque church divided in 3 levels. It's very similar to the one of St. Paul that you see. St. Paul have more decoration, but the layout of the church, the main structure is basically the same.
It's basically the same, yes.
And we know the interior also have many similarities with St. Paul, because there are old paintings that we can compare the altar of this church with other one, and we see many similarities. So on the right side of the church,
what is this?
This before was part of the monastery. So the church was not only the church, there was also schools, workshops, residence for priests. So all the block of this street was part of the complex of the church. But in the 1830s, a government that was anti-Catholic and liberal, they expelled the priests, and this place near the church became a police station, and later became a fire department. And then they sell the buildings and become housing and shops.
So what are they trying to do to this building right now? Because it kind of destroys the whole scene of this street.
Yeah, you are right. The building is out of proportion here, the church. There was some people who suggest to demolish or to make it lower. Right now, I think it's under remodeling for the police local. So it became the old faction of the 19th century.
Right. Tell us a little bit about your work as a city planner, Professor. What are some of your concepts? What do you try to incorporate when you engage in these projects?
So I try to understand the two cultures, the Portuguese and the Chinese, and to put them together in the project. And also try to identify what is the spirit of a place, because some place, for example, the Lilau Square, you have a Chinese name that is, for example, the Old Lady's Well, Apojeng, but the Portuguese is called the Fountain of Lilau, so it's another name. One is a fountain, another is a well. And there are stories behind, Portuguese stories and Chinese stories. So Macau have many times these stories that run parallel, the Portuguese and the Chinese. Sometimes they mix, sometimes they don't. So I try, in every project I did of different squares, I try to get the main elements, the story of the square, and also what is called the genius loci, the spirit of the place, and then develop the project around that ideas. We work in a team of Chinese and Portuguese. We also are careful about the feng shui, the feng shui.
You do?
Yes.
Do you believe in that, though?
Well, it's important in the design because if we do some mistake in the feng shui, people will criticize us. So we try to play safe and to be a place where Chinese and Portuguese and foreigners can feel at home.
Right. So it's very interesting that you mentioned the Lilau, because I'm not sure if the reflection is going to work, but I do want to show you a photo on my phone. So I was at the Lilau, the Apojing, the grandma's well the other day, and with a photographer, and he showed me how to take this photo, and this is what we took. So you have
That fountain have a story. This was some years ago. That we rebuilt the story of the fountain, because before there was a square with two pipes coming out.
Okay.
And local people don't like it. They think it's like a cemetery or something.
Okay.
So we restored this.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we did. But the original was an old man with a beard, but people feel scared. So they want something more cheerful picture.
You changed it to
a
child's face. This
So
looks
it's
like a fountain.
To listen to the opinion of the people.
It is, absolutely, because the people are the ones who live in the city, right?
Let me show these two buildings. So this building is the 1920s, is when we start to use balconies. So balconies start to come out. Before the facade was completely flat. And then you have the building there that is the gray building between the two yellow buildings. So this building was a pawn shop house. So
Pawn shop.
the pawn shop.
This one, the Adidas shop.
Yes, correct, the Adidas shop. So this was a building that worked like a bank, and people also put their values there and changed for money. And this is a sign of Macau as international trading, but also gambling, because Macau for some time have a no currency. So you have Chinese currency, Hong Kong currency, different currencies all around. So this place is very nice. And here is the street going to São Paulo ruins.
And here's the street. But if you just take a look at this particular street, though, you can see it's very Chinese. The residential building the residential buildings basically look like the ones you would find in Beijing or Shanghai.
Yes, there are Chinese influence everywhere.
Right. So we're going down this road, right?
Yes, we go to the cathedral.
And just
You can see the amount of visitors. Macau have more than 30 million visitors a year.
wow.
It's more than many countries, and it keeps growing.
Right.
So this is the alley going to the cathedral. And in this alley we have the house of the local mansion. It was-
Another very Chinese street.
yes, it's a Chinese building.
Professor, I have a stupid question.
Okay.
Is there a reason why Portuguese architecture is so colorful? Because they're so delightful to look at.
Oh, yes. Well, the houses have to be plastered by law, also because of hygiene reasons,
Right.
to protect from some bugs. And so mostly we're white. But then people start using other colors like yellow. In Macau, they use many: yellow, green, blue. Not so much red, because red is not good feng shui.
Oh, red is not good feng shui.
That, like an animal that is cooked already.
But just explain to some of our Western audience who don't know about the Chinese concept, what is feng shui?
Well, feng shui is about geomancy, is the relationship with the space, with external forces that can be benevolent, bring good luck, or bad luck. So it's the setting and layout of the building, of the space. For example, sharp things are considered bad luck. And for example, we have a sharp corner in that, you see there at the end, there is a kind of a gate with some tiles.
With some tiles, yes. That's a very square.
Yeah, that before was a very sharp corner with the tree on top. So we decided to cut that corner and make a Portuguese fountain, but with some elements of the history of Macau.
Okay.
So that's the...
To kind of flatten the corner, is that what you're trying to do?
yes, somehow like this. And
Before we go down there, though, Professor, there's something else that we want to show our audience. This is a Chinese mansion.
yes, this is the end of the 19th century, 80 something, and was built by a rich man. He was a businessman, but he also he liked to gamble. But he was a very charitable man, so he helped many people in Macau. So his son also received a decoration of the Portuguese king at that time.
This is also part of the historic center and
Yes.
one of the 20-something sites
Yes.
within the...
The building is considered a monument, and it was restored because many after they died, many families used the building. So the government bought the building and then restored to the original site.
Excuse me. And this house is so different from everything that we just saw, from everything surrounding it. So let's
Yes,
go
it's
in to
completely
check out the interior of this building. But talk to us a little bit about the historic center of Macau, Professor, because it's listed by the UNESCO as an important world cultural heritage. And you must be so thrilled when that was announced, because you must have contributed to that.
Yes, that's true. I'm glad that the contribution, because when we did the project of the squares, like this Cathedral Square, San Agustin Square, when we did the project, we are not thinking in the UNESCO, because the UNESCO original plan were only 12 buildings, no squares. But the final decision, they include the buildings, squares, and more buildings in the squares, because they think this is a heritage that is alive, even if the squares, like Snado Square, is not very old, but it represents a tradition. So that's the tradition of the city. So they decide to include our squares, some of our squares, in the UNESCO list. For me, it was a surprise, but I was happy because this means our project was well done.
Because although they're new, they have a traditional spirit. I mean, the soul of it just goes along with the tradition of the city.
Yes, that's true. So we keep the tradition of the old Portuguese, the old Chinese planning. There was another option, that is to do something modern, not linked with the past, as some people defend that option. but my team and the heads of our department, they defend to keep the tradition of Macau Portuguese. So we are successful that UNESCO recognized this.
That was a great achievement.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing right now inside this building.
So
It feels calm.
Yes, it's very calm. So you have a screen on the entrance. The most important rooms are on the back.
Oh, these are the important
Yes.
rooms.
And some of these glasses were imported from Europe because most people at that time have just wood.
And
So
when
no.
was this one built?
These 80 somethings, so late 19th century. So the most important rooms are behind, and on top there are 2 floors. You can see there are holes in the roof. This is typical of Western buildings in Macau,
Wow.
and it's to allow the ventilation,
Okay.
so the air to go to the structure.
So let me just communicate with my cameraman in Chinese. 推到那个小孔上去看一下. So we're just gonna zoom in the camera to show more of the little holes on the ceiling that you just talked about. It's for ventilation. I mean, I'm quite familiar with this kind of buildings, yes, but I've never seen holes on ceilings like that. But you explained those are elements borrowed from Western architecture.
Yes, that is, in Macau is common in the Western buildings. But the Chinese also use it.
So they actually work for ventilation.
Yes. If you don't have this, the wood will deteriorate very fast. And then you can see the windows, all of them can open. And so this facilitates the ventilation. And the central courtyard and skylight allows the natural flow of the air to go up. So because at that time there was no air condition, so it's through the shape of the walls and the roof that make the circulation of the air.
And it actually works because I feel cool inside this.
Yes,
building.
it works.
Yes, and just look at the exquisite wood carving
Yes.
on the panels up there. Very impressive.
And then in the gates there are some elements of the feng shui also, like the red bats, that means good luck, the mirror, and some elements of the Taoist traditions.
Sorry, you mean the arch?
The arch, yeah.
I can barely make out what's on there. Are these roses?
Yes, but there are some kind of dragon and also some bat on the end of the arc.
And is that lotus?
Yeah, lotus and
Also symbols of prosperity. And those are birds down there, right?
yes. So the landscape that was appear in the many decoration of Chinese buildings.
And that's koi fish right there, right? That's fish,
Yes.
right?
So this is a kind of a bat, not a fish.
Oh, this is not, it's not lion, it's not fish either.
Yes, it's a strange animal.
It's a strange animal.
Yeah.
Colorful glasses must be so rare back then.
Yes. They exist mother of pearl elements. And so you can see also the wood here is perforated to allow the ventilation.
Right.
Natural ventilation.
The wisdom of earlier generations when people didn't have all the cool technology.
And these gates are very common, so you can close and keep the air coming in.
It's amazing how this house situated on such a busy street, once you enter it, it's another world. It feels like another world.
Macau have many of these kind of pockets, architectural pockets. So, and this is what is special about the city, is that you walk in the street and then you have a building that have some stories, some heritage. And we try to promote this, so to avoid the destruction of the buildings, because the real estate pressure is very strong. Macau have a huge GDP, and of course the casinos and the housing. We need buildings for housing. So we need to find a balance between the heritage protection and development.
It's one of the world's most densely populated cities. It's tiny. I think it's smaller than the Shanghai Pudong Airport, no? At least the peninsula.
Yes, it's very small. And in some places we have more than 55,000 people per square kilometer.
So then you have to make smart use of the land.
Yes.
Is there anything that the government is doing that you feel is wrong, you feel is damaging the culture here?
Well, I think in the past there was some mistakes, and now the government now is more careful. But I think what we need more is more public consultation to the experts in the university, but also to the common people. Because if you ask the people, you will do less mistakes. If you don't ask, so the mistakes can happen. And so yeah, but I think in general the planning was okay.
For me as an outsider, I mean, the city looks amazing. It's not like anything else. It's not like no other city in this world. It's a wonderful combination, a seamless blend of the East and the West.
Yes, but before we have even more like that. So many areas that now disappear. And I think what should be also important is to preserve the Chinatown, at least some parts of the Chinatown, because for many years the heritage was the Portuguese heritage. But now people are also concerned with the Chinese tradition. Although you have many buildings like this in China, but it's important to protect them also in Macau, so you can have the feeling of the Chinese lifestyle and the Portuguese lifestyle.
So, Professor, should we move on to the tile
Yes.
right here? Again, Portuguese ceramic. Does this count as one?
Yes, this is a copy of the map of the 17th century, and in this tile we can see the Senado building.
Thank you.
Senado building with the cross,
Right.
and also the cathedral, that is the other building there with the cross. So this was the historical center of Macau in around the 60-30, so the 17th century.
And we have a mixture of people here in this photo.
Yes, the people come from a book by a British, Peter Murray, and he described the people, the Chinese Mandarin that you see there, the Jesuit near the church with the stairs, the Dominican, the Dominican that is near the church with the steps, the lady with covering the veil, so is a Macanese because they dress in this way, and then the Portuguese on the right, Augustinian, Franciscans, and then the Portuguese ship on top.
When you say the word Macanese, I just want to make it absolutely clear. It doesn't just mean anyone from Macau, anyone who was born and raised in Macau. It's actually a mixed marriage.
Yes, most of the Macanese, many people don't agree what is a Macanese.
Okay.
But mostly of them are mixed. Was white. Was this
Story during our trip to Macau this time about the Macanese food.
yes.
I think UNESCO also recognized that as the world's first fusion food because, like you said, when the Portuguese married local Chinese women, they have to kind of please their husbands in the kitchen. So they found local adaptations to the Portuguese dishes, and that's the origin of the Macanese food.
Yes.
Very interesting history.
Yes, the Portuguese like to mix the food, so the Portuguese food is very diversified, and they adapt things also from India, from Malaysia, and from China. So it's adaptation, a fusion food.
Right.
Yeah, it's very unique.
Right. So you wanted to show us this church. It looks like the one that we just saw.
Is the bishop. And what happened is the Bishop of Macau to China, to so the bishop was very also with Singapore. There was a church. So this was.
So, Professor, about the fountains that we just saw, including the one at Apoding at the Lilao, talk to me a little bit about the nozzle of the fountain, because they look like the fountains that we would see on the streets of Rome.
Yes, well, there is influence from the Roman architecture. The Romans used also the mythology, the Poseidon, the man with the big beard. And so this inspired the fountains also in Macau. They tried to, well, in Macau and in Portugal, the inspiration. So the model is real Roman model, but adapted locally, because sometimes you see a dragon face.
Right.
So it's not a man, it's a dragon.
And then with the particular one at the Lilao, at the Grandma's Well, like you said before, I think the background is an unmistakable Chinese architecture, white wall with black roof tiles. Just standing, just like a European-style fountain, just standing right next to a Chinese-style residence architecture. To me, that's just so wonderful.
You have the Chinese architecture in Lilao. And in Lilao you have houses from the 18th century. The small white houses, they are from the 18th century. You have Art Deco, and Lilao was also a center where many British lived. There was a British hospital nearby, British church, Anglican church, but they moved to Hong Kong. So all of the foreigners living here moved to Hong Kong after 1840.
It's also one of the city's first Portuguese settlements when the Portuguese arrived, right? Because
Yes,
it's close to water.
No, the first one is near the Camões Square, Macao, because the Portuguese stayed near the boats and in the hilltops. So the Portuguese like to build on the hills, and because they feel more safe.
Right.
At the same time was better the ventilation, so the air coming to, because the place is very hot. So if you are in the high place, you also can have a good view from the surroundings.
Right. So, Professor Pinheiro, I think we're almost running out of time, but just one final thought for you as an architecture. I mean, we talked about gentrification quite a few times in our live stream. That's inevitable in modern cities today. Is it, as an architect, do you have a solution for that? Can architecture be a solution for gentrification?
No, it cannot be the architecture, particularly in places like this where we have free market. So when the free market run means the one who have more money or to pay, make the prices go up. And this is what happened also here in Macau. So the owners of the place raise the monthly fees, and they can raise, the sky is the limit, so the one who can afford to pay more, they pay. So this is what caused gentrification. One solution for that is that the government could help the small business and make them stay longer, so without the need to be expelled. Otherwise everything that is local will disappear. No?
Right. So what can we do about cities losing its original flavor, losing its character, losing its soul?
Well, the architecture clearly helped, but also you need to attract talents, and I think this could be part of the diversification of Macau, is to attract shops that show creativity in food, in the arts and crafts. So the old tradition of Macau, bring it back to some places that are new. But these, of course, need planning and also the government help.
And also professors like you, architecture professors like you, who are
Not only
training.
like me, but different researchers from tourism, because we have universities that teach tourism management. So all of this is important.
Right. And with that, I think we come to the end of our live stream, as well as our little adventure today in the heart of Macau, in the city's historic center. Once again, this is Professor Francisco Pinheiro of St. Joseph University of Macau. Thank you
very
again
much.
for joining us, sir.
Okay.
It was wonderful
Thank you
adventure.
very much for your patience and time also. Thank you.
So goodbye from us.